Hogni the Lightbearer, Book 1, The Forgotten. Chapter 1. Hogni knew the movements off by heart. He'd been trained in the Vale of Tears since he'd been able to walk. Year upon year, a new facet of the dance was added to it. He was dressed in the traditional tabard that he'd worn for the Dance of Veils. Around each wrist and ankle, the traditional white, 1.5 foot long weighted ribbons that had to be worn even in practice. He found himself distracted. He had half-heartedly run through the movements, earning the annoyance of his teacher, Svasht, whose face seemed to go even darker than it already was. "No, Huknir, you're supposed to move more fluidly, like water. You're as graceful as a water buffalo on roller skates today. Give me strength," Svasht said. His arms ramrod straight by his sides, with fists clenched. Huknir attempted the sideways water wheel, an aerial horizontal cartwheel in which no limbs touched the ground until it had been completed. He had performed the movement thousands of times, yet, as he launched himself in the air, he mistimed his takeoff. Consequently, when he landed, he overshot what should have been a beautiful transition. He fell, sprawled on his back, hitting his head and stunning himself. Whilst trying to gather his senses, he looked up into the purpling face of Svasht, who was looming over him. "No, no, no! I can't believe you'd attempt that when you're not concentrating fully. You could have broken something." At the same time as he was being berated, some of his classmates passed by and looked through the windows of the double doors to the hall. One of them opened the door whilst he was practicing. There was a cambric flash. "Hey, Hukner, we can see up your skirt," shouted Yokvan, his tormentor-in-chief. Yokvan, usual suspects, laughed loudly at his joke. Hukner sat up quickly, trying to smooth down the bottom of the upended tabard. His teacher, Svasht, was seemingly oblivious to his embarrassment or even the presence of the 4 boys in the hall doorway. For what seemed to be like the millionth time this year, he cursed the choosing ceremony, which had set all of this in motion. "Just my luck," he thought. "Wait for it." Svasht looked like he was going to say it. Huknir counted down in his head. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. "Huknir, you were chosen for a reason. You bonded with the stone when you were a baby. The damn thing practically rolled into your arms, and no man or woman among us was strong enough to even take it from your grip." Svasht turned his back, and Huknir continued to mouth all the words he knew his teacher would recite. "There were 9 other children with you, and you were the one who was bestowed the honour." Huknir rolled his eyes. "Honour, Svasht?" said Huknir, getting hotly to his feet. "To look and dress like a member of the female gymnastics team? Except even their uniform doesn't end in a skirt. Look at this." He pulled at the hem of the tabard. "And these." He lifted his arms, allowing the ribbons to dangle. "I suppose I should just be thankful at least it's white and not pink." "Ooh, Huknir, you'd look good in pink," shouted Yekvan. That's all he needed. In the heat of the moment, he'd forgotten that they were being observed. Svasht turned and raised an eyebrow towards Yekvan and his friends. Bodies disappeared through the door, which was shut quickly behind them. Huknir and Svasht could hear the sound of rapidly fading footsteps on concrete. Huknir let his head fall. He knew he'd have to endure more of this sort of treatment from them when Svasht wasn't around. He shook his head, trying to keep hot, angry tears from coming. He turned his back to his teacher to make sure he wouldn't see them. When Huknir had been younger, he'd loved the idea of becoming the Lightbearer. He had imagined it would all be about heroics and rescuing princesses. Now, he was 12. He knew that the closest he would get to being the superhero he'd pretended to be in his youth was on the games console that was starting to take up more of his time after school when he wasn't required to do practice. It wouldn't be so bad, he thought, if he could at least join the annual fighting contest that was held every year around this time. This year, it would be held the week before his succession to the position of the Lightbearer. During that ceremony, he'd have to perform the complex dance of the Vale of Tears to the whole of the Faroe Islands. He'd enjoyed the daily rigours of training with a light heart and good humour, learning the often complex dance components, and had actually enjoyed it all, until last year. That was when he'd grown aware of some of the remarks his classmates had made behind his back, and then he'd not wanted to wear the tabard at every practice. Svasht had insisted it was tradition and they would not break it. He picked out the ham. God, he hated this dress thing, he thought. Tabard, Svasht corrected him, almost absent-mindedly. How does he even do that, thought Hogni. I hadn't even said anything. Hogni was almost 13, for goodness sake. Whilst all the other boys of his age would be fighting for honour and prestige in the annual boxing contest, he would have to watch from the sidelines. Then the week after, he would get to wear a medieval man's dress and perform the Veil of Tears. It was okay for Svasht. He was dressed in black combat trousers and soft shoes, although, as usual, it looked as though his t-shirt had been shrunk to the point of where it was in danger of tearing should he move too quickly. If only he hadn't been put forward for the choosing ceremony as a child, he cursed silently. He'd missed out on so much. Since the age of 11, when boys were allowed to don boxing gloves and step towards manhood by fighting in the annual competition, he had been forced to sit with the girls and old people and watch. Even if he'd been able to complete and he'd taken a beating, at least he could have held up his head high and been part of the camaraderie the participants enjoyed. But it was forbidden to him. "Ah!" he shouted. He felt a hand on his shoulders and he deflated under it. Hogni, I know that you've had to sacrifice a lot, but the role of light bearer is the greatest honour in the Faroe Islands or anywhere else that a boy could wish for. That may have been true, but what Svasht and his parents didn't seem to realise was that he was part of the Xbox and PlayStation generation. It was all about who had the best phone, best laptop, and Facebook, which thankfully he didn't have a page on. The picture that Yekvan had just taken would definitely be uploaded to it, and he just knew he'd be an object of ridicule when everybody saw it. Thankfully, he wouldn't have to read any of the comments made about it. I know, Svasht. Maybe if we were still in the medieval days, when heroes could be heroic and save the country from marauders and help to unify the kingdom, things would be different. But this is 2013, and the only thing I need saving from right now is this afternoon's maths lesson, which is going to be just as painful. And the picture from Yekvan, the one he just took. Not as painful as your warm down is going to be after you messed up the sideways water wheel. Muscle ups, dips, push-ups and stretch down, Svasht said. Yes, Svasht. Hogni was resigned to it. Not that he actually minded the warm down too much, as it was one of the few times he could release some of the aggression he was feeling. He threw himself into the muscle-ups, dips, fingertips and knuckle push-ups with passion. He managed to complete the 500 of each he was required to do, broken down into sets of 50s, and the stretch down too, which included box, side and standing static split holds. He felt much better after he had his shower. He looked at the time on the clock that was hung on the wall and decided to hurry, so he wouldn't be late for his maths class. He made good time, although his sandy-coloured hair was still damp and stuck to his head when he arrived, and his clothes were a little dishevelled. At least he wasn't going to face the wrath of his formidable teacher, the ironically named Miss Joy. He entered the classroom to find the other students were still milling around, and the teacher hadn't arrived yet. His best friend, Bita, smiled when she saw him, and half waved to get his attention. He went over, noisily pulled out the chair and sat beside her. How did it go? She asked. He was about to answer when Yekvan chimed in. Bita, why do you sit next to that loser? Don't you know you shouldn't sit next to boys who wear skirts? They're a little funny. The whole class laughed at that, and Hogni allowed his head to slump forward onto the desk in front of him, simultaneously cursing his bad luck and wishing the ground would swallow him whole. But as usual, it didn't. He often wondered why Bita hung around him. He was an object of ridicule most of the time, while she was not only pretty, but popular and clever. Like his family, she was one of the only consistencies in his life. He turned his head to her from his position on the table, and when she sensed him looking at her, she turned and smiled. Then Miss Joy came in, and any happiness that had been in the room had the good sense to leave as she started the lesson. The end of the school day, apart from his training with Svasht, was when he felt the most free. Living on the side of the mountain in Sandavaya, he had unlimited space. He loved the walk home, staring at the mountains and listening to the sound of the water as it hurriedly made its way off them to the sea. He looked up to them, on either side of him, as familiar to him as the fingers on his hands. He took a deep breath of the crisp air. Sometimes he thought life wasn't so bad, and smiling with that thought, he made his way home.